All right. Welcome, everybody, to our first webinar of 2024. Happy New Year. And on behalf of the team here at Art South Dakota, we're pleased to have you join us. We're excited for this one. We have several webinars in the works for this new year, three of which right here off the bat are with our friends at the South Dakota Arts Council, and more to follow. So keep posted on all of that. Couple announcements I want to make. First of all, I should say my name is Jim Spears. I'm the executive director of Art South Dakota. I forgot that part. And a couple things we have coming up at Art South Dakota. One, right around the corner here in February is Arts Advocacy Day at the state capitol. So we'll be headed to Pierre on February 14th to meet and greet and talk about the arts at the state capitol. We always look forward to that every year, and we always bring great stories, great data to share with our legislators. If you happen to be near Pierre or feel like making a trek to Pierre in the middle of February, you are welcome to join us. We always love to have as many people in the rotunda that day as we can get. More information is on our website, so you can find out more about that event. One thing I will mention, and we'll ask more about or mention more about this later. We ask you, if you have the time, to reach out to your legislators and say thank you for their support of the South Dakota Arts Council, just the arts in general in the state. Thank them for supporting the Department of Tourism. That is the entity that is part of the South Dakota Arts Council, the main department the Arts Council is part of. The Arts Council is such an integral, important part of our ecosystem. They really do serve the entire state. They're I think the one granting organization, state government organization that truly serves the arts in every corner of South Dakota. Just a couple facts. I'm sure Kate will mention more of this, but in FY22, the Arts Council awarded $1.5 million in grant support to the arts across the state. Those grants they were 335 grants, and they reached 85 different communities, which is 70% of South Dakota County. So they truly, on an average year, get to most of the state. They are an integral part of our support infrastructure, and we're excited today to learn more about the work and the grants available to artists. And one of those grants, I will say, is a grant that I've been part of over many years, well before my time at Art South Dakota, and that is I've been part of the Touring Arts Grant network. I want to say our group's probably been in that for well over 10 years, maybe even 15 years now. And it's an excellent program that brings South Dakota musicians and performing artists to every nook and cranny of the state. In FY22, the Touring Arts Program sponsored more than 140 events in 110 different sites, 45 different communities, over 20,000 audience members were reached. It's really a great program, and one of the programs you'll learn about today, there are a number of great programs for artists, individual artists. So with that, I'm going to turn it over, and we can get this started. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Andrew Reinhardt, and we'll get going. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jim. Yeah, I'm Andrew Reinhardt, the Community Development Director here at Art South Dakota, and just so excited to have you with us today for the first of these 3 sessions with the South Dakota Arts Council on their spring grants. First and foremost, I do need to quick say thank you to a couple of our partners that make this webinar series possible, one of whom is the South Dakota Arts Council, as well as the Bush Foundation. They really allow us to keep these free of charge to all attendees, and share the recordings afterwards, and really try to spread this information as far as we can across South Dakota. Also, for any of you that are involved in any arts organizations, we have 2 grant webinar opportunities next week on Tuesday and Friday for the 2 different categories of arts nonprofit organizational grants that are open right now. So please feel free to register for those as well, or watch for those recordings later. Today, before I turn it over to Kate, just so you know, we'll have quite a bit of time for Q&A to answer your questions about eligibility, about all sorts of things. I think Kate will cover a lot of your questions during the slides, having done these before with Kate. But as you have any questions, please use the Q&A button, and then I'll bring those questions to Kate once we get to the question and answer time. But also use the chat to just talk to each other and say hello, and let me know if you have any technical issues. We're really excited for a lot of these webinars that we have coming up. We're really trying to continue to expand and diversify the offerings we have, and we're really excited to have Kate with us here today. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kate from the South Dakota Arts Council.
Thank you, Andrew. A little bit of technical difficulty trying to get my speaker set up, but I think we're good to go. And I see Andrew nodding at me, so that means that you all can hear me, which was my biggest concern. So give me just a minute while I find the right screen here and get my slides up. All right. Give it just a second to get the window going. And first and foremost, I want to thank our friends at Art South Dakota for hosting us today and for giving us the opportunity to be able to be here with you all and sharing this information. And then, of course, I want to thank everyone who's taking the time out of their busy day to come and learn about our grant programs that we have through the South Dakota Arts Council. Our main objective today is just to discuss our open grant opportunities. And I do want to lead with a reminder that applications for artists are open until March 1st. Just a little bit of background on who we are and why we do the work we do. First of all, we want to say that we appreciate all of you and the work that you do to support the arts across our state. The work you do is vital, and we appreciate everything that you do. We're here to serve you as our constituents, to support your enthusiasm, to recognize your challenges, and to work alongside you to expand South Dakota's arts community. The mission of the Arts Council is to make quality arts programs accessible throughout the state through funding, which is what we're here to talk about today, connection, and resources. We are an office within the South Dakota Department of Tourism. We provide grants and services to artists, arts institutions, schools, and other nonprofit organizations throughout the state. And that is all possible with funding from the National Endowment for the Arts and the state of South Dakota. And I want to thank Jim for calling out our touring arts programs. Like he said, it's our mission and duty as a state agency to get arts into as many communities as possible and to give as many people throughout our state the opportunity to experience and participate in the arts in whatever way works for them. So kicking off, let me just see if I can move my control screens here. Sorry about that.
Everything looks great on our end, Kate. So
okay, great. A little rusty on the Zoom side here. So again, just a reminder that applications are open right now for South Dakota Arts Council grants, and that system will close at 11:59 p.m. Central on March 1st. If you, as an applicant, need support with an online application, we do ask that you contact the South Dakota Arts Council as soon as possible, and we will do our best to accommodate your needs in whatever way we're able. The website is posted here. All of our grants come in through a system called GoSmart, and when Andrew sends these links, these slides out after the webinar, those links will all be active and live in the PDF copy. Otherwise, you can always jot down that website right here off my screen. I would advise that everyone read the grant guidelines that we have posted, and we'll go through that a little bit before you start your application. And then we have staff before, and we are here to support you with whatever questions you may have on the application. We can provide technical support to you or just talk through your project or your proposal. You can always contact me directly or any staff person with any questions on the application process. And I do just want to let everyone know before we dig in that we do not accept or review applications that come in late or that are missing any of the required materials for the application. And we'll go through that today as well. So just to highlight those resources, I talked about one of them, and that's our grant guidelines. We have an entire menu of resources posted on what we call our applicant portal. And these are resources and information that are available to you as potential grant applicants. And then we also have information out there on what it looks like to be a grantee, what kind of resources and support do we provide once you do get funding or if you do get a grant. So again, the grant guidelines are where we recommend everyone start. We provide the full information on all of the different categories of support, as well as what do you need to be eligible to apply? What do I need to provide as part of my application? And then what does the panelists look at? What do reviewers look at and ask as they read through my application? All of that is included in the grant guidelines. We have a section within the guidelines specific to artists and what you need and what we need from you as applicants. The portal also includes samples of the full application. That's all the questions, all of the details, all of the things you need to include in your application. Those are posted on the applicant portal by grant category as a PDF. And then we also provide you with a Word document to help you work through any narrative sections within that application, regardless of what you're applying for. If you're applying for an artist grant or project grant as an individual, those templates are really there to help you build your responses in environment that will do spell check and grammar check for you before you before you submit that application. A lot of that is on that applicant portal. All of our staff contact is there, as well as any webinars like we're hosting today. Full schedule of what we call water cooler chats. Those are Q&As directly with our staff, and then just good tools for applicants to use as part of the application. Again, before we move on to the next slide, I do just want to remind everyone to start with those guidelines, get a good understanding of what we're looking for and what you need before you dig into that application. And in line with our resources, just hitting on some of the staff support, I mentioned that we do these bi-weekly water cooler chats. Our first one is tomorrow at 3:00 p.m. So that would be Thursday, January 11th, 3 p.m. Central. Those are Zoom conversations, and you can find that link active on the applicant portal, as well as probably on our Facebook page and other resources as well. We also have a Facebook group that we monitor for questions and chat from people looking to apply, from people within the field. And then, like I said, our staff contact is listed. Just so everyone is aware, we have a staff of 4, and then we have an additional 5th staff person dedicated to our traditional arts and apprenticeship program. All of our contact information is listed online, and staff can be reached anytime between Monday and Friday, 8 to 5 p.m. Central. We have a few people that are working West River. Availability may differ based on where they're located in the state, but you can reach out to any of us and ask questions. Digging into some of the high level, we're going to start with eligibility, high level requirements for what you need to apply for a South Dakota Arts Council grant. And I did want to include a photo here. How can you have an arts webinar without any pictures in it of, happy people doing arts things? And this is an example of an artist collaboration grant that took place in 2022. A few artists working together to do art in new and different ways. So we will talk about our collaboration grant as we work through here. There's a lot of information on the screen, but basically what we're identifying is the types of art that we support as the South Dakota Arts Council, and you'll see that full list here on the slide. And then we also support South Dakota-based artists. So eligibility requirements vary a little bit from category to category of support, but as long as you've been living and working within the state of South Dakota for at least a year, you're eligible in one of our categories of support. Again, just a reminder that people that aren't meeting that eligibility requirement won't be reviewed. You're not eligible for funding. And so I would hate for anyone to start on the endeavor of an application and then find out, well, I live in Nebraska, and now I know that I can't apply for an Arts Council grant in South Dakota. Again, those eligibility requirements are included in the grant guidelines. And then we do have a few restrictions, high categories of groups that we do not fund. Students are one that we just do not fund. So anyone pursuing a high school diploma, graduate, undergraduate, or professional degree. And then to that point as well, anything that would be considered moving towards credit or college, college credit, high school credit, that would be ineligible for an application as well. And then we have a category of support for project grants for organizations. We can't see applications coming in from an artist and an organization for the same work to be done. And then just a reminder to everyone that this upcoming grant cycle, we are funding work that begins on July 1st of 2024 and ends on June 30th of 2025. So as long as the work you plan to do is within those confines, you're good to go there and can certainly apply for funding. Again, just a reminder that academic research, formal study, tuition assistance, all of those things would be ineligible for support. And then activities within the grant cycle, we do not fund activities that are taking place during a religious service or are closed to the public in any way. And that is pretty much it as far as the specific restrictions for those high level applications. And then we do have some specifics in terms of if you've received an Arts Council grant before as an artist, there are certain categories that you're not able to reapply in the next year. And then we have categories of support that have a 3-year wait period before they can apply again for one of those artist grants. This large chart is included in those grant guidelines. I did just want to bring it up on screen here so that everyone can see it in the full. It just depends on what you've received in the past that will allow or not allow you to apply for something this cycle of support. Again, this is posted in the grant guidelines and it's here on the screen. If you have questions about when you received your grant before, we do post those, and that website link is on this slide as well. Or you can always reach out to us as council staff. We can come in and let you know when you got your grant last time and whether or not you have any prohibitions moving forward into this category of support. I get a lot of those questions, so it's best to ask ahead of applying and then find out that you fall under one of these restrictions and you're not able to apply. We're going to look at our artist grants next, and I really wanted to do this through the lens of what the outcome is. The question that I get the most often from the field is, what category of support should I apply for? And that is not my place to decide for you. That's really your place to decide. And the best place to start is, what is the outcome? And that's how we're going to look at our artist grants this year. So the question that I would ask back to you if you're trying to consider which grant to apply for would be, What is your outcome and who are you benefiting? We have two paths forward for individuals to apply. You can apply for a project grant as an individual artist, and those grants are for up to $2,000 or 50% of the planned expenses. And that is, you are doing work to serve the public. And then our artist grants are a wide array of funding levels. But what it comes down to is you are doing work that benefits you as an individual and you as an artist. It's extending your career, expanding your career. It's improving the arts landscape of our state. So with that in mind, I'm going to start by talking about our project grants. And again, when I talk about the project grants, I'm talking about you doing work that is for public engagement with and access to the arts. We're talking about you're creating a piece of work or you're doing some level of arts education, something that's integrating the arts into the community in which you live or in which you support. Those are all examples of artist project grants. Again, these are up to $2,000 or 50% of your project expenses. And the thing here about the project grant is we're looking for what we call a one-to-one match. And so an artist project grant, you're requesting $2,000 from us. So we need to see $4,000 in projected expenses and then also $4,000 in projected income for the work that you're planning to do. So that's where how we define a one-to-one match. Got a one-to-one match in that I'm requesting $2,000 in income from the Arts Council. I've got another $2,000 or more in expenses. And then I have a projection of $4,000 in income total for the work that I plan to do. I do want to let everyone know that grants that you accepted as an individual, these are a taxable income. We had a wonderful webinar with our friends at Art South Dakota, I think it was last spring, where we talked about taxes for artists and how grant income may or may not impact your taxes. So just keep in mind that when you're applying for grants, when you're receiving grants funds from us, this is taxable income, just like anything else that you're doing related to your work. So just want everyone to be aware of that too. Our project grants have a lengthy list of things that you'll need when you get ready to apply. And again, this is included at the top of that PDF sample on the applicant portal. We include it in the application itself of all of those things that are required to be able to apply. And it's on this slide just to make you aware that, okay, I really feel like I want to do a project grant. And what do I really need to be able to do that and make that work? And then before I move on to our artist grants, I just want to give an example of what an artist project grant could look like. And this is totally the question that I would get from the field. I want to create a blank and distribute, exhibit, post it. Would this be a project grant? And as long as it's benefiting mostly you, then you would apply for an artist grant. If it's something that you're doing to create art that's solely for the public, it would be a project grant. So an example of a project grant would be if somebody came to me and said, I want to host an arts class at my local senior center. I want to use the grant funds to purchase supplies, market my class, and host online registration. That's a perfect example of an artist project grant. So it's not necessarily you creating something to expand your market, expand your reach, expand your knowledge. It's really you doing something that is benefiting the public and your community in some way, shape, or form. So that's my example of what a good way to think about that artist project grant. So moving into the arts grants, the artist grants are here to benefit you. and to benefit your career. And this is funding for individuals to explore and build their artistic practice, to inspire future growth, and create work that is going to move them forward in some way. We're supporting individuals to create new work, promote their work, reach new audiences, purchase materials, equipment, whatever it is you need to develop yourself and your work. That's really where these artist grants are coming into play. Again, this funding is taxable income. And the big difference here is these are non-matched. So we have several levels of funding, but all we need to see in your application is where that money will be spent. We'll have a section in the application where you're reporting your income, and that can be solely from that grant income. So if I'm applying for an artist fellowship grant, that's a $5,000 grant. My budget is just showing where that $5,000 is going to go to support the work I plan to do. And then my income sheet is just showing that I'm getting $5,000 from the Arts Council. And that's great. That's what we want to see. We don't need to see anything more than just that. A good example here of what an artist grant would look like compared to what a project grant would look like is I, again, would get this question. I want to create a new collection of work and distribute, exhibit, post it. I would use the grant funds to rent studio space for me to work in, to document and post my progress, and to garner more interest in my work and the work I plan to do overall. I also want to market my finished product. So how many times did I say me, my, I? It's all about me, and that's what we want to see with these artist grants. We want to see that you are benefiting yourself, your work, and that's it. We don't need to see anything more than that, and that's the biggest difference between these two categories of support. So for artist grants, like I said, we have several levels of funding here available, starting with the artist career development grants at $2,000, moving into those artist collaboration grants at $6,000. There's summaries for each of those categories of support on the slide here. And then we dig in a little bit deeper in those grant guidelines as well as to what each category of support means and what that looks like. I will let everyone know that with very few exceptions, the application is exactly the same across the board. So when you dig into that application, if you think, oh, I'm just not sure which one I want to start with, you can look at the full application as a PDF. You can start to identify what the scoring criteria is and what those reviewers are looking for. And then that summary is a really good way to just base your decision. If I'm a newer artist and I'm not really comfortable talking about my artistic excellence or my record of work, or I don't really feel like I have enough legs to stand on to make that argument, then the artist career development grant is the perfect place for you. And maybe the fellowship grant isn't the right avenue just yet. If you're confident, I've been doing this work for 15 years and people know me, I've got great promotional material, and I can really hammer home that I've been doing this work and I'm making an impact on the arts in South Dakota and have been for decades upon decades, then that fellowship category is the best place for you to land. And that's where you should submit your application. But it's really for you to decide and determine, not for me to tell you which category of support to go for. I always come back when people ask to what our application pool tends to be for each of those categories of support. And just big picture, we see anywhere from 25 to 30 applicants in the artist career development or the artist fellowship grant category. Traditionally, we fund 10 to 15 artist career development grants or 5 to 10 artist fellowship grants. So based on return on investment, if you want a safe pool to jump in, that's just a good thing to keep in mind. You know, we're seeing seeing 30 applicants in artist career development, and we're funding, upwards of a third of those that are coming in. So just something to keep in mind as you're making that decision as well. We have a fourth category of support that I don't have listed here. And again, that's our traditional arts apprenticeship grants. They have their own guidelines and their own parameters for applying and for review. And all of that is posted on our applicant portal. So to apply for these artist grants, here again is that checklist of what you need. This is included at the front end of that PDF copy of the application, just identifying what those required sections are, what we recommend you include in your application, and then what's required as part of the application. Like I said earlier, we provide you with a Word document to help you work through things like your artist statement and your narrative. And then also we provide some resources out there from our friends around the arts community that will help you in building and developing your artist record of work, and then how to define and choose what samples and what support materials you want to include as part of that application. So we'll dig in next to what the reviewers are looking for and how that process works from our end once your application comes in. So we have a panel that reviews applications after they close, and staff vets them to make sure they're complete and eligible. We send those to a panel for review. They evaluate and score all the applications based on the scoring criteria that we provide you in the guide, the grant guideline. And that's based on the artistic merit and artistic excellence or quality of each of the applications. As I said, we as staff review all of those applications. We will let you know ahead of time if we see something that's off or missing from your application, and give you a window of time to be able to go in and add that in so that your application is eligible and we can send it on for review. So that panels consist of both in-state and out-of-state professionals and are facilitated by our board members. We as staff do not participate in the panel process, and we just are really on those calls to take notes and facilitate as we're needed. Panel service is limited to 2 years. So if it's been 3 or 4 years since you applied the last time, it's likely that your application is being seen by a completely new set of panelists. In addition to vetting the applications after that March 1st deadline, we provide a grant review or draft review of your application ahead of it going to panel. This is done by staff, and we're really looking through your application to make sure that your narrative is complete, you've provided everything we need with the budget, and then your support materials are there, and everything is consistent and again, complete. We try to do our best to help applicants improve their applications by checking for mistakes or omissions that may cause ineligibility. We are not providing you with any grammatical or spelling corrections or any rewriting edits, and we provide you feedback in time to make changes to your application ahead of the deadline. The deadline for draft review is February 13th, and that closes as well at 11:59 p.m. Central. And then we've talked a little bit about some tips to consider in making your choice of which category of support to apply for, but just a few more tips to keep in mind. Again, read those grant guidelines, read those instructions, understand what our expectations are ahead of starting that application. And if you dig into anything and you have questions, we're really here to help you and to answer whatever questions you have. So even after this call, if you're still like, I just still don't know which category I should apply for, or I know Kate talked about the project grant or the artist grant, just feel free to shoot me an email, give me a call. Any of us can respond to your questions and provide you with whatever assistance it is you need. keep in mind that, as I said earlier, we're seeing a lot of applications in these categories. And so funding is competitive. And so making sure that your application is complete, consistent, answering the questions, providing good materials so that we get an understanding of who you are and what you want to do, that makes a big difference in whether or not you're selected for grant funding or not. And then keeping in mind the review criteria as you work through your application. Again, we've got those samples and those Word documents out there to help you craft those narratives, craft your artist statement. And then just a reminder that incomplete or late applications are not reviewed. Make sure you're answering all the questions, providing the maximum amount of materials that we're asking for, and then just be clear, concise, and consistent with that information across your application. And then the big one, especially for artists in a small state like ours, is, again, we have panelists that are in-state and out-of-state panelists. So don't go into the application assuming that everybody in the panel is going to know me. So why should I have to talk about who I am or what I do? Like, I'm Kate Vandel. Everybody knows who I am. So it's really important to act like nobody knows you, and that this is who you are, this is what you want to do, and this is why you want to do it. And then the last thing that I would add is to proofread your application. Once you finish the application, just take a look back through it. Make sure you're answering the questions. Give it to a friend or a neighbor, or best yet, pass it to somebody that doesn't know you as an artist or know the work you do, and they can really give you a sense of what maybe you're not answering, or what maybe is great about your application or is maybe lacking with your application. Just so everyone knows, all four of us here at the Arts Council can answer any questions that you have. We have a dedicated staff person, Annie Hatch, she's our South Dakota traditional arts specialist. If you have questions about the traditional arts apprenticeship grant, her contact information is within those guidelines as well. And her information is also posted on our website. Please feel free to reach out to any of us with any questions that you have. We would way rather answer your questions on the front end ahead of you starting an application or finishing an application than coming back to you after that March 1st deadline and having some difficult conversations at that point. One final thing that I would add is we are always seeking panelists to serve as reviewers for our grants. Information is on this slide as to what grant panelists do. You can find more information as well as an application to submit yourself or someone else as a panelist online at our website as well. And that is all I have.
Great. Well, thanks, Kate. That was really, really excellent. It's always amazing to me that there's just so much. There's so much to get through, even just in the artist grants. There are a lot of options, which, on the one hand, that's why I always recommend people reach out to you, because you can really help guide them through that process. But on the other hand, the nice thing is there's a lot of options, and there's going to be something that will work well for just about everybody's project in the state. And really thankful for all that the Arts Council does. A couple of questions have come in that I wanted to share. One comes, does grant funding for the individual artist grants need to cover consumable expenses like rent, supplies, equipment, or can it also support an artist's time?
That is a great question. Yes. Yes to both. Either one. Yes. Please know that you can submit an application where all you are doing is paying for yourself and for your time. Yes, absolutely.
Great. A couple other questions that have come in. One is just on the amount of money you're requesting. These all say up to a certain amount of money. You can request less than that, correct? You can request anything in that range?
You can. It's best to go for the whole bucket. Yeah. I would say that I'd be hard pressed coming out of the arts realm to be undergoing a project and feel like $2,000 is really sufficient for either my supplies or my time over the course of a full year. So that's something that I would keep in mind. I don't need to say this, but artists are constantly underpaying themselves and undervaluing their time. So take the time to make sure that you are putting that front and center in your application, and knowing that this is for the course of the entire year. If you have a project or you have an idea in mind and you're just not sure that you're going to hit that $2,000 threshold, especially for the artist grants, that's one that I would ask that you just think about a little bit harder and just identify, am I really paying myself or for all the work that I intend to do over the course of the whole project? Again, the artist project grant is a little bit different, whereas it is up to $2,000. And that is really coming down to what your projected expenses are for that. Again, I would just ask that anyone planning to do work that is public-based work, to make sure that if you are the one responsible for carrying that project out, that you are considering paying yourself as a facilitator of that work, in addition to any supplies, materials, marketing that you need to do to promote that work that you plan to do.
Definitely. Yeah, I know we all artists are criminally underpaid, and we sometimes internalize that a little too much, I think. A couple other questions have come up. One question that came up, I won't necessarily go into the specifics about the person who has provided funding, but there was just some questions about applicants needing to live in South Dakota, and some questions that there may have been support to people outside of South Dakota in the past. Are there other grant categories that maybe that could have been a part of? I can have this person reach out to you directly with the specific questions, but these artist grants, you have to be residing in South Dakota, correctly?
Yes, yes. And a few examples that would come to mind would be the roster program that Jim talked about earlier, our touring arts program, as well as our artists in schools and communities program. Roster artists can be from outside the state. Our collaborating artists can be from outside the state. That application would need to come in from the South Dakota resident. And then our traditional arts apprenticeship grants, those can be facilitated by artists outside of our state, but the apprentices participating need to be South Dakota residents. If this person has questions specific or wants more detail, they can certainly reach out to me directly or anyone on our staff. Yep.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much. I know, again, with so many opportunities for grant funding, sometimes there can be some questions. There's one question kind of specifically for students. This question comes in asking, what if as a student you're working on a project that could be published in an anthology, for instance, and you want to run a workshop to generate the stories to go into that anthology? So you're not necessarily applying for funds for work you're doing for college credit, but something that is generated while you are doing your work as a student.
This is where it gets a little challenging, but still that would be a no. Anyone that is enrolled in, whether it's higher education or high school education, is not eligible to apply for these types of grants from our agency. Yep.
Great, thanks for the clarification there. Here's kind of a question about project grant versus artist grant. Again, with this is a pretty good generic question, but with very specific questions, I definitely urge you to reach out to the staff of the Arts Council to talk about your specific project. But this one is, would public or free painting classes fall within that project category, with money going towards the supplies, marketing, and venue rental? Because that is, my assumption is it would, as you're nodding, because it's a public serving event, correct?
Yes, yes. As long as it's entirely up to the artist on which category of support they choose to apply in. Especially when we're talking about something that is a free event. It may be tricky to show that you've got the $4,000 in income that would be required for a match of a $2,000 grant. And that can get pretty challenging. You could always apply as an artist career development or a fellowship grant applicant as well. And just be able to clearly identify how doing these free classes is helping you as an artist as well as your community. So that could be a challenging one to tackle, especially if the classes are free. But yeah, that could be an approach as well. And again, just clearly identifying how teaching these classes free to your community is helping you.
Great. Um, So another question, one person asked if you could briefly cover the scoring criteria. I know that the scoring criteria for the grants differ depending upon the grant types. They are in the grant guidelines document. I pulled that up just to briefly show, if I can find the correct window out of the 800 that I have open right now, just to briefly show. You'll see in the grant guideline document, you'll come down to the career development fellowships collaboration grants, and here there's a review criteria which shows you the points and the percentage of scores, and then further up for the artist or organizational project grants, they have the scoring criteria there as well. But just in lieu of going through line by line through this, Kate, are there any kind of just general principles that you might recommend people keep in mind when they're looking through that scoring criteria?
Yeah, I would say in summary for both categories of support, when we're talking about the artistic excellence or quality, really talking about the work that you intend to do and the people that are facilitating or participating in that work. And when we're talking about the merit, we're really talking about the outcomes or the impact of that work. So that's a good summary for those two categories. It's better defined and better laid out in our guidelines. So don't go into it thinking like, oh, all I have to think about is the impact and the quality. It's more than that, and it is detailed pretty specifically in those guidelines. And keep in mind that we're including in those grant guidelines not only what the scoring criteria is, but also specifically what panelists are looking for in your application related to the questions that we're asking and the information that you're providing. So that's where those guidelines are really going to hammer home not only what the scoring criteria are and what reviewers are considering when they're providing you with your score, they're also identifying what specifically is this panelist looking for in terms of what I'm providing as part of my application. What we tried to do very, very hard in our office and as we work through our grant guidelines annually is to make sure that the questions we're asking you as the applicant are relevant to the panelist. And that's where those guidelines and those criteria come into play. Like, what am I being asked? And then what is the panel looking for? And how does that relate to how they're going to review and score my application? Yeah.
Great, thanks. I'll also mention that in the follow-up email, I'll include a recording of a webinar we did about a year ago, I think, with a panel of panelists. It was folks who had served as panelists on Arts Council grants, National Endowment for the Arts grants, grants for other states, but have all three also written grants and been on that side of it. And so I think they had a lot of really good tips and tricks, like Kate said in particular, of the don't assume anyone knows who you are. You know, as a small state like South Dakota and a small, tightly knit creative community, we often kind of think that we all know each other, and we do, but when you have these out-of-state folks coming in, they don't really know your work, and you really want to put the best foot forward, and some other tips and tricks on providing good work samples and other things like that. So we'll definitely send that link to that recording, as well as the link to this recording, all of the slides from Kate, and other links that you'll need to successfully write a wonderful grant application to the South Dakota Arts Council and keep creating wonderful work in the state of South Dakota. So that's all the questions so far. I'm sure that you'll get a lot more in your email, Kate, as always. But please reach out to any of us at Art South Dakota for other ideas for webinars, for anything we can do to be of service to you and your creative work around the state. And please reach out to anyone at the South Dakota Arts Council with any questions about their grant opportunities, especially those open here for this spring cycle. And those links will be sent out via email to the email that you registered with for the webinar. As I mentioned earlier at the beginning, we do have two additional webinar opportunities next week for organizational grants. So we hope you'll join us either Tuesday or Friday if you're involved in any nonprofit arts organizations and are curious about grant opportunities. And just, yes, as always, please reach out to us anytime. My email is at andrew@artsouthdakota.org. And, you know, in these snowy months in particular, it reminds me how grateful I am that we have such a dynamic creative community in South Dakota. You know, even though we're spread out from each other and often it's hard to get together, we're really looking forward to continuing these virtual learning opportunities as well as getting together for Arts Advocacy Day and for the Spring State Arts Conference. So thank you to you all, and wishing you a wonderful rest of January ahead.